Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 68th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, first of all, I'd like to thank John again for his questions because it always inspires me to do other videos and push further some of the ideas that I explore. In this episode, I'd like to first explore what I call original dualities or the fundamental dualities, which in my mind are going to be very hard to transcend, at least at our level as human beings. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Then maybe re-examining a bit the idea of consciousness in the mind, just a few extra information about that. Then form versus the non-manifest, and choice and models. And I think it'll become clear where I'm getting to in the future. And I mean in this as I go along with this. So here are some of what I think are the most irreducible dualities that will endure, even if we go to a non dualistic world. The duality between existence and non existence, which is basically the same, pretty much, or linked to the idea of being versus non being. Being, though, is linked to a sort of consciousness quality, and existence can refer to both a quality as an object or a subject. But of course, in the last video, as I said, in the few last videos, I was exploring the idea that everything is beingness in one form or another, because there is only the mind, there is only the consciousness. And the only difference is that as it shines through certain forms that have reverse engineered themselves enough that they don't need to experience themselves and abide by certain rules, then they may look like they're not alive, they're not being, but actually everything is being. But still, this is an non-reductible sort of duality. And from non-existence springs existence, from existence springs non-existence. And I've gone into this also with this idea of opposing vibrations that cancel each other out when you superpose them, and this flickering of the universe between nothing and everything, between existence and non-existence, and that those two are actually the fundamental building blocks of reality. So when we're talking about the nature of source, the nature of source in my mind is its foundation, its very foundation are these sort of original or fundamental dualities. Another one, of course, is nothing versus everything, or zero and infinity. And so if you take those all together, that is the nature of source. That is, source is at the same time beingness and non-beingness, at the same time existence and non-existence, and at the same time nothing and everything. And then it can actually split between those two extremes and take two vantage points. And this is where I clarify things about past lives, is that, as I've said before, all the forms that represent a transcendence where the universe basically finds a way to prevent perfect symmetry via a new form, which creates a sort of a temporary, how should I say, strategy for avoiding superposition and going instantly from nothing to everything and from everything to nothing. For instance, transitioning from just sound and waves to the photon, which is a sort of a spiraling toroidal field of vibrations, preventing them from superimposing. And just go to my previous video where I explain a bit more this in more depth. These forms appear instantly. So you'd have like the photon here. I'll just skip ahead, maybe like the living cell here, the human being, whatever is like global consciousness, where we are just one cells, Maybe here, like a galactic consciousness, like a galaxy that is conscious of itself. A galaxy. Here, maybe, oops. Here, maybe it's a universe conscious of itself. And here, maybe it's the multiverse conscious of itself. And basically, the important thing to understand is that there are always two observers, not one actually. When I'm saying that source is just this one singularity that looks at itself from different angles, it's not completely true because there's two ways of seeing that singularity. There is the nothing angle, where you look at it as nothing going towards everything, and the everything angle, where you start from everything and you go to nothing. So, source observes itself via two points of view, one representing infinity, one representing zero. And like I said, that consciousness then shines through all of these different forms. And, oops, let me just take another color. And then has these forms interact with each other. Interact with each other, like maybe these are interacting, maybe the, and it's a very, very, very complex mesh of experiences here, which intermingle and observe each other. And the thing is, when time starts, which is not really time, but simply the evolution of consciousness or the level at which source has sort of experienced itself, there are almost no beings in incarnation. Basically, it's as if source incarnates in a few waves or a few sound patterns that interact with each other. But as soon as they have some kind of experience, that experience feeds into what we call, what they call Akashic records in the esoteric circle, I believe. Or you could say, for instance, the morphogenetic field or genic field. That is another idea of a space where experiences are sort of memorized or saved and can then influence on subsequent experiences. And as soon as like you have a point of incarnation here where a wave interacts with another wave, they feed that information and that affects all of this chain, all of this chain going forward. And the same here when, like, say, infinity splits into multiverses and these multiverses experience themselves, but they have no idea what they are. That information also goes this way and circulates through all of those. And this information circulates everywhere. Like from the human being, it spreads in both directions. Now, this idea of past lives and future lives or reincarnation. Reincarnation is a bad way of looking at things. First of all, I mean, this is basic knowledge now in spiritual circles, but everything happens at the same time, but not everything. When they say everything, it's everything in a certain slice of the now. And in a different slice of the now, maybe you have different incarnations here. Maybe this mesh is a little bit different, just like the neural connections in your brain are a little bit different tomorrow than today. You're still fundamentally the same person, but your neural connections depend on what you lived the day before. And, this is what's funny is that the loops part, for instance, is if you have a fundamental experience here, for instance, that one of these vibrations has lived that is really important, it may influence all of the other experience as well. So there's a pattern, for instance, that repeats. Like, for instance, if they discover harmony via the phi ratio between vibrations, then all of the other sort of incarnations are going to be sort of will draw from that experience in achieving harmony at this level of existence. So phi was the answer and the spirals that have the golden ratio, the music notes that have the golden ratio between them, and the flowers and all of that, the seashells, all of these things simply have that same kind of pattern or same kind of information simply because of that. Because if the harmony or the rules that this level has achieved are solid, they will impact and influence all of the other ones. And the same goes from future to past. And that's where you have the story of the Anunnaki, for instance, that are somewhere here, that went into the past here and created humanity. But ultimately, all of this is just neural connections. It's not um, like this idea of time and linear time is very, very inadequate to explain how all of this works, because just like the neural connections in your brain, for instance, you may live an event somewhere in what you would say your past, like for instance the fact of being abused, and then that neural connection reappears somewhere in the future because you will be abused again or something like that, and those neural connections they'll be revisited, so it's as if it's happening again now, this abuse, simply because it's in resonance with the reality you're living in a new now. And so these are just like neural connections in the brain that rearrange themselves. And so at any point in time, if for instance you did a QHHT quantum healing session at you know a certain moment of the now, your future lives and your past lives are going to be basically um, all the different neural connections or incarnations that are linked to your experience in that moment of the now. And all of these experiences basically are um, linked to each other. It's just like basically if you look at the surface of the ocean at a certain point in time, all of the shape of the ocean, all of the different waves or the deformation on the surface of the ocean at that point in time are absolutely linked to each other. And if you change this point in that vibration in the ocean, it affects all of the other ones as well. But think of this as instantaneous, whereas here you have still cause and effect. Like if you drop a rock in here, it'll take time to reverberate. Whereas in the universe, this happens instantly. You may see the effects of it going into the future, for instance, if you change something here as taking time because it reverberates in all directions, past and future instantly. And then you get the feedback of that a little bit later in another moment of the now, where neural connections are rearranged. And so it's this story where basically, like, imagine right here, you have an ape that starts, that picks up a branch to create fire. That allows you, because you're interconnected with that here. Oops, at this, well, let's choose another color. Sorry, this is going to be again a little bit messy, but there's just no way around it. Right here, you're doing a fire camp with your buddies. And because you're doing a fire camp, you're actually sending information in the form of intuition to that ape to pick up the branch, the burning branch, and master fire. And thanks to the fact that that ape mastered fire allows you to start your fire camp in the future. Like I said, everything is interrelated. And so if you do a QHHT session tomorrow at another moment of the now, or maybe in a year, then the quote unquote past and future lives or incarnations that you're going to connect to may completely change and may be completely different, because you're a different person and you're living different experiences, and those different experiences are linked to what everybody else in the universe is doing. Which is also why when you help one point in the universe, you help all of the other points. When you help our experience, it helps all of the other ones. And so past and future lives, well, first of all, future lives is, of course, when you look at it from the vantage point of infinity going towards zero, then those represent your future lives. So let's say that this is where you are incarnated. You have always two points of view, um, um, two sort of forms of consciousness, or two aspects of the source that are sort of going through your consciousness. One that looks at your reality going from infinity into your present moment of the now, and that of course includes all your future lives. And then one going from zero to your present moment, which is all of your past lives. And so it's a kind of a different connection, but they still kind of mix and mingle, because source kind of reaches into all of these at the same time. So it's really, again, thinking about this in a linear fashion is very complicated. It's more like the two hemispheres in your brain, basically, that are interlinked and connected, or like your two eyes, basically, the stereoscopic view. It's a nice metaphor also for these two sources that observe reality or the singularity from two points of view, one from its everything vantage point and one's from its nothing vantage point. Now, another thing to examine, and I've talked about this in my previous videos, but maybe a good refresher, is in line, the normal distribution. Our reality probably the well, maybe it's even narrower than that. Let me just correct that. Maybe this is how narrow it is. This is the possible experiences where you have duality, because you are sitting in the middle of two opposing energies, and you are, like, for instance, good versus evil, and all kinds of other dualities stand and exist because you are right smack in the middle in terms of the normal distribution of the available kind of energy, or the tug and pull between order, chaos, between nothing and everything. Because just imagine that in the universe, imagine if the consciousness that is streaming through your eyes, you have much more of the consciousness of the drive that goes from zero to infinity. Oops. Then you have this, it's almost as if you're pushed in the back for evolving. Now, this is, of course, it's a poor metaphor, because it's more like you have more of the consciousness which seeks order. Like you have much more of this phi intuition, you have much more access to harmony and all these things. Then you might be somewhere here or somewhere here. It's the same, because this is a mirror, basically. And your experience, therefore, is going to be extremely smooth and fast. It's just like, for instance, if you put a ball or if these are forces, for instance, and you have two magnets, for instance, two poles, and you have one that has a power of 30% and one of 70%, regardless of whether you put, like, if you put, for instance, a ball in the middle, a metal ball in the middle, it will accelerate and very quickly reach this other magnet. And so imagine if these forces, for instance, of zero and infinity, or order and chaos, or being, non-being, or existence, non-existence, are out of balance, then your experience is going to be extremely smooth, either towards instantaneous self-destruction or very quickly. And there's not that much of an experience. Or if it's the opposite, if it's 70-30, then you're going to very quickly reach a high level of development and order. But the experience is going to be very fast, and there's much less, basically, that you're going to learn, because you have a sort of a free pass. But if you have these two poles that are of equal power or almost equal power, and you're in the middle, then you're going to kind of like, it's going to be a very slow process of evolution. And maybe you just like add like a little fraction, like put like 49.99999 here, and here like you put 50.00001%. And that is what I believe this makes it so special about our reality, is that we are sitting somewhere over here, and that means that basically, um, we are what well we are firstly what holds this universe together, in my mind, the universe, the experience together, because um, we are a sort of point of friction between two mirror universes where things are very much orderly. And thanks to free will and the fact that we don't really know where we're going, we are acting as a point of interference between otherwise perfectly symmetrical vibrations. That is, it's the same thing that I've been saying about the strategies that and the forms that the source finds to avoid the superposition of all that it is and the opposite of what it is, via the photon, via the atom, and all of these forms. But ultimately, even all of these forms still have their matching mirror frequency, or frequency of opposite phase. What keeps them apart is free will, and the fact that you don't know. It's kind of a point of friction or interference between two perfectly symmetrical informations or vibration, and saying, you know what, today I'm going to go this way, tomorrow I'm going to go that way. And because we're basically hesitating always in which direction we're going, then we're acting as a point of friction for all of the rest of the universe to experience itself. And we're kind of like we're this last dot that is in kind of an inverted bell curve, that is an inverted normal distribution, where this is our reality. All of the rest are seemingly more evolved, and you have like Pleiadians and all kinds of other civilizations that are highly advanced, and we're really like everybody's saying that we're very how should I say, uh, well, not very sophisticated as humans, and like duality, stuck in duality, and not very evolved, and like many races don't understand that we have all this violence. And well, it's normal, because when you have this near you're near the middle in terms of sitting right in the middle in terms of dualities and energies, then your reality is the last one, the one that's going to evolve the slowest in terms of consciousness, but it's also the one that's going to hold all of this together and preventing it to collapse upon itself. So we are at the same time extremely unevolved, and very much um, the last ones, basically, in terms of our level of evolution compared to other civilizations in other parts of the universe in terms of consciousness. That is, at least from my understanding, or maybe we're here somewhere, but at least somewhere towards the bottom. But our role is very important, because this sweet spot is where everything, like, it has really a big importance. Now, of course, not any more important than anything else. Everything has a role in the universe, of course. Everything has a purpose. But I'm just saying that too often, many people beat themselves up saying, oh my God, we humans were so terrible compared to, these or that races and these and that races. According to their history, they evolved so much faster. Their level of consciousness was raised so much faster than ours. Some other channelers also say that duality and polarity was a failure. And I just don't buy any of that. I think that, on the contrary, polarity and duality, we've managed it quite well, and that the universe is quite satisfied to, like, basically, of of the work that we've been doing, because we've perfectly managed to make sure that well, we fulfilled our role. Basically, we fulfilled our purpose, in my mind. um, it's this this is one of the things that, if you want to take away from my videos, the most important thing is to look back at the whole human history and to understand that we've never left the plan. We've never strayed away from our purpose. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't change or that there's no better way of doing it, but that the better way of doing it is also part of the plan and is a natural process. It's just that now we have the opportunity to do it in a conscious manner, and with that, and getting rid of our self-loathing. It's the story about, for instance, when I'm comparing our what we're experiencing now as our birth. So the baby is not going to hate on itself that it was draining its mother's resources, that perhaps it peed a little too much in the womb and therefore it's now filthy, dirty, and polluted. But it's not also going to stick around in the womb and say, okay, I'm just going to be nicer in the womb. It's actually going to transition to a different state of consciousness, a different reality. Um, And it does that because it finds harmony and also acceptance that this whole process of growing inside the womb is normal. And there was nothing not normal about it. Like, no gynecologist is looking at a baby and saying, "Oh, your baby peed a little too much in the womb. He must be evil." And that is the non-dual, quote unquote, vision of an advanced civilization when they're looking at us normally, is seeing, well, actually, you're fine. You've never left the plan. You can tell yourself stories, just like to scare yourselves, just like a baby can say to itself, "Oh my God, I'm going to suffocate in the womb. Look how much pee I'm bathing in. Maybe I'm even going to poop myself, to shit my pants, so to speak." And suffocate in my own excrements. And I mean, it can play that. It can go into fear, and have a very painful experience if it wants to. I don't know if that's the direction we want to go, but ultimately, I think birth is also the moment where the baby sort of gets rid of this self-loathing and this fear. That's also part of the cleansing of our own kind of experience. And what I'm trying to say in my videos is to put, like, to try to really zero in on what is it that we're doing here, what is our role, and how do we situate ourselves compared to um, other civilizations and our role in the universe. And because I believe that everything has a purpose, just like every neural connection in your brain has a purpose, um, I'm trying to find ours. And the reason I think that um, this model is correct is because I don't think that from this perspective you can understand what the role of duality is, or this concept of the mirror and the free will, the use of free will and the interference. Only from a vantage point where you're actually living in that reality can you have the insight and perspective to understand this. If you're from this perspective and everything is easy peasy, then of course you don't understand why it's so difficult when you're at the bottom here. Um, and of course, again, it's not saying that these perspectives have nothing of value. They also have certain things of value that we cannot see from our duality ridden, polarity filled perspective. Now, the last few points I wanted to talk about is form versus the non manifest and choices and models. Um, so, form versus the non manifest. There is no experience outside of the form. Maybe there is a feeling kind of experience, but not a rich experience with the five senses. Here, perhaps you can have like sort of a feeling or intuition, Like you can basically connect to something that is non-manifest and just try to feel through meditation and projecting yourself into that non-manifest, to feel if that's something you're attracted to and you'd actually like to experience in more depth in a world of manifestation, manifested manifested in form. And that's just basic strategies of how we navigate infinity. If we didn't have this mechanism of, gut feeling, basically, for a future that is non-manifest, like for instance you turning a curb and being run over by a car and suddenly get a sort of a cramp, and you stop in your tracks, just short of manifesting that non-manifested reality and experiencing the form, which is you getting run over. Short of that, then we couldn't navigate infinity, and we'd probably like die instantly via plenty of mishaps, or just the randomness of having an experience in form. But what I'm trying to get to in models versus choices is that ultimately we are, right now, as humanity and humans, we are mostly living experiences in the form. And so to try to find a reality beyond any model, because ultimately, if you look at all my videos, I do have a model, even if it's very, very, very open and allows for a lot of experiences, of different experiences, and allows for plenty of different things which seem contradictory and paradoxical to coexist in a way that makes sense. It's still a model, and that's okay. And of course, it's not the ultimate model. How could it be in when faced with infinity? But I don't think as humans we're ready to navigate in form and in the manifest without a model. It's just that we're going to probably make it more and more open, more and more flexible as we move along in our experiences. And what that may look like is, imagine in this little model here that instead of going from zero to infinity, when you're observing via here, you skip ahead and you just look at it from the photon perspective, and then immediately just jump to the human perspective without going through the cell, without going through atoms, without going through molecules. You skip all of it. And so basically then, as a human, you identify yourself as living light. How much more freedom do you have in your reality? Because you've skipped, the consciousness is not observing reality or infinity, or not exploring infinity through the lens of all of these layers and moving through these layers. And then you, as your consciousness, basically then with your will or your intention, you send an intention or a thought, and that thought goes through infinity and zero, and then circles back through all of the layers and updates your reality. Like for instance, you're going to say, I want to jump out of the window and fly, and then that's your intention. And of course, because your belief is not strong enough, it'll not bypass all of the layers that don't agree with that statement, and therefore you're just going to fall down and die. But if you truly believe that intention, then it's as if your thought would go through, would observe reality through those two consciousnesses, and would go, for instance, just through the photon layer and then jump straight directly to your experience, and there you'd be soaring through the sky. Because ultimately, why would there be any limitations on your experience if all you are is just a bundle of photons, a bundle of color, basically, a patch of color that is moving alongside other patches of color? Um, and of course, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. And the only thing that's limiting you is that you would have to have a belief that is so strong that you would bypass all of these other kind of layers. By doing so, though, you would disconnect completely from the reality where most people live, which is going through all of these layers. And so you'd find yourself in a different dimension or reality altogether, and you'd disappear from the eyes and the experiences of people around you. It's almost as if you jump on, like, install Linux when everybody else is on Windows, basically. You'd be in your own world. Um, but the interesting part here is that um, creating an experience, which is the consensus reality of billions and billions and billions and billions of consciousnesses, which decide jointly to experience things with those rules. There's just so much more that you can learn from that, because if you just have this one vantage point of this one consciousness with only its desire for experiencing reality, how much can it actually learn? The more people you have, the more interactions there are between them, the more eyes and pair of eyes to experience reality and experience it, the more you can learn. And of course, the more duality there is, the more you can learn as well. So we are kind of like heroes from the vantage point of many advanced civilizations, because dealing with so much duality, which is where the density aspect comes in. Density, in my mind, basically this 3D or whatever that is really dense reality, is due to this ratio here. It feels really dense because it's almost like you have to really physically make a lot of effort to drag this metal ball to go towards one polarity, one magnet versus the other. Whereas, and that's this resistance that you feel when confronted with reality, all these things that you're going through, the pains, the difficulty of even getting your house cleaned up. Things take time. You have to think, you have to learn. It's really a painstakingly long process, and that is because of this. Otherwise, if you're in a real imbalance and you're going towards order, you're really pushed in the back. I mean, everything is done for you, basically. You feel this kind of it's very easy to navigate also because you're pushed, so you know exactly in what direction you're going. There's much less free will. It can be a more enjoyable experience overall, but again, the free will part and this density or the drag may also be part of what makes our reality so rich and so interesting for the other consciousnesses. I'm starting to ramble, but I just wanted to go on just one last um, tangent here and try to completely reverse what you might think about learning. Actually, if you really think about it, it's more a process of forgetting. Oops, I don't even know if there's two T's or not. But basically, if you take the point of view of infinity and infinite consciousness that is omnipotent, omniscient, then it knows everything. But by knowing everything, of course, and if you've learned a bit to navigate and understand dualities, knowing everything is the same as knowing nothing, because knowing everything means that you know everything and its opposite, meaning you know the sky is blue, but you also know it's all other possible colors, because that exists within infinity. You know that you're going to drink milk, but you also know that you're going to drink water at the same time, and Coke and wine and all of the other possible beverages, because there is that possibility in infinity. And so ultimately, what do you know when you know everything? It's the same as knowing nothing, because if you make all the choices and you know that you've done everything, it's the same as if you've done nothing. So in order to know anything, you first have to forget part of what you know. And that's when you know something. Like you know, for instance, that you drank water, because you don't know that you drank wine and Coke and orange juice and all the other possible beverages. And your consciousness basically is only focused on that one version of you that drank a glass of water. And so you can know that you drank a glass of water as opposed to all of the parallel selves which at that very moment drank something else. Simply because how could it not be possible? It's a possibility, it exists. And so knowledge comes more from forgetting than from learning. Learning is more a process of remembering. And so when you take a little baby, for instance, when they're born, neuroscientists say, oh, it's magical when they hear out these languages, all of those parts in their brain fire up and like they're like an empty vessel that is ready to learn all these languages. That's not the accurate way of thinking about it in my mind. What it means is that the babies start with knowing everything. And then the first years of their life, say towards year like 1.5 or something, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, they're actually forgetting. They're actually being trained via the being exposed to their parents, for instance, and reality. Their brains are being trained to forget and ignore all kinds of things. Like, okay, I'm being fed this language that is like French. That means I have to forget all of the other ones. Forget Chinese, forget English, forget everything. And so they spend their time forgetting everything, and then they reach a low point where they know nothing anymore. And then they start remembering during their lifetime, which we call like until they're I don't know, like say 60, age 60 or whatever, and then it sort of falls flat till their death. Then they remember. What we call learning is actually remembering via a process which is called learning. And it's just a form or a strategy that you give yourself to allow yourself to remember certain things that you already know. So for instance, like I said, like when you learn to play the piano, the process of learning is simply a strategy for connecting to a future you which already knows how to play the piano. And it's just that by playing the piano and practicing, you are actualizing, self-actualizing that future you that already knows how to play the piano. And so it's completely the reverse, you see. From a certain perspective, we're not learning anything. We're actually just remembering. But again, if you remember everything, it's the same as remembering nothing. So that's why you have to be very strategic about what you wish to remember and what you still want to keep forgotten. And that is, I think, the mistake that many people sometimes do, is that they want to know everything. And if you want to know everything, and that's one of the blockages that I had, is if you set your intention on that, then you're done for. You're going to be completely lost because you're going to, well, end up knowing nothing or having no relevance. If you, however, you set your intention for remembering certain things with a certain and not other things, for instance, and like the intentions that I'm setting is remembering things that are useful for us right now as humanity, and not knowing what's happening in universe lambda x whatever in a parallel dimension, or simply actually knowing about this process itself, is something that I'm more interested in than knowing everything. So I hope this was interesting for you guys. And of course, if you have any more questions, feel free to ask, and see you in the next video.